I believe really firmly, and maybe it sounds corny, but I believe that science is the engine of human prosperity. It's the way we make discoveries about the world, and then in an evidence-based way, figure out the best steps for applying those discoveries to our lives. You know, maybe some of the discoveries are just about opening up wisdom, but in other ways they're about finding cures for diseases, finding solutions to problems like energy security or other things. And I believe that scientists can play a really important role in sharing their findings, because they're the ones who are working right at the front on them. Wow, 3 skills for scientists and researchers, which reminds me, of course, in journalism, everything is in a rule of 3. If there are 3 things, we have a trend. So the trend for scientists and science communication might be, first, share your enthusiasm. I have never met a researcher who wasn't just chock full of passion. I mean, who else can spend 20 years just to build an instrument and it might blow up on a launch pad, but they're ready to go? Well, who else would go into the field? I've seen scientists, they go into the field for weeks and they're trying to score a bunch of information. There's a lot of passion behind that. And if there's anything stronger than passion to ignite excitement in somebody else's eye, I don't know what it is. I know for journals and for talks, you have to be very serious, and I totally get it. I do that too when I'm writing seriously. But any way that you can share your passion, I think that's a great thing. The second thing to remember is something that I learned way back in journalism class, which is, try to find a way to explain it to, a family member or a buddy at a party. You need to change the way you speak for different audiences, which is something I think we do naturally when we're speaking. So a third tip I have for researchers on that same point is, if you're having trouble articulating it in writing, because that's such a formal process, do what I do. Go talk to a friend, and when they say, hey, what are you doing that's exciting? You start explaining it, because there's something very natural about conversation, and you say, well, if you were me, you'd say, oh, that would be a great lead to my story. But you might say, that'd be a nice way into the op-ed I'm trying to write for a local newspaper, or a way to explain to the local community why water quality is so important, or to go to a school board and explain why biology is, a real thing. It's evidence-based, and we have all this information. There aren't giant gaps in what we know. So use those tools that you have. Oh, and can I add a fourth thing? A fourth thing I would say to scientists, because I understand this, you all have super busy day jobs. You got enough to do, and then people are going to come to you and go, oh, you got to communicate now. Listen, all of us are on social media, and we do other things as well. So I've mentioned op-eds and formal writing, but hey, maybe you're on Facebook. Hey, maybe you're on Twitter or Instagram. Use it to show a little of what you do, because guess what? Every single thing you do actually counts. A lot of Americans have just never met a scientist. They like the idea of you, but they haven't got a personal connection. If you have any opportunity to build a personal connection doing what you already do, then it's not a big burden onto what you're doing. So, I totally encourage you. I love working with scientists, speaking to them about what they do. You do awesome work. Don't be shy about sharing it. I bet you find a lot of people really curious. A valuable thing about science. So I think people sometimes have this idea that science is like a bunch of other lobbying groups. It just has its own opinion. Like maybe there's the lobbying group around, I don't know, people should have more toys on Halloween Day or something. But in the case of science, they are not just another group with a bunch of opinions. There are 2 big differences about science. One is, first of all, that it is evidence-based. The great thing about science is, if you don't like my result or you're worried about my result, you can try it out and you can see for yourself if it works. And that's what experiments are. They're a way to say, hey, I have an idea, it's a hypothesis. And then when I try that idea out, I confirm my hypothesis, or I don't confirm my hypothesis, and eventually you do enough of that and it becomes a full-blown theory, which, by the way, is different for science than other places. When we say theory, we mean a description that fits a body of evidence. It doesn't mean something that somebody just made up. The second thing that's really unique about science, so I mentioned that it's evidence-based, but when new evidence comes in, something really unique about science is it will change. So when new evidence comes in and it demonstrates, physically demonstrates that, you know what, this idea that we had might not be quite right, it might be more like this, science shifts. So science isn't a bunch of people with one particular opinion. No, it's people who find out something that looks like truth as we can objectively measure it, and then will shift as the world may change. Those are two amazing things about science, and I think for those reasons especially, scientists owe it to the public. It's not just something that you should weigh, but you owe it to the public to help share the evidence-based view on topics of importance. And one more further thing about that. So if you look at any front page of any news website, or if you like me and you still like the paper kind, you can look at a newspaper. If you think about it, the top stories of the day all have a science underpinning. It's energy security, it's cures for Zika, or other diseases, or cancer, or other human challenges. It's how are we going to find enough safe water in a world where climate is shifting. Oh, and speaking of climate is shifting, as water levels change, where are people migrating? How will we deal with that? That's already happening. That's a real thing. How are storms changing in force? All of these things have a science underpinning. And so science owes people answers to their questions about it.